Cloud9 have done it again and assembled a killer lineup of Fudge, Blaber, Jojopyun, Berserker, and Vulcan. Jack basically said, like, screw all this talk of the LCS dying, I'm gonna buy the dip. Now, I think everyone is going to have this entire roster ranked highly for power rankings, and rightly so, but there's some cool aspects that I don't even think Cloud9 considered when constructing this roster, so here we're going to discuss exactly how these players will fit together. We're going from top to bottom like we usually do, so let's start in the top lane. Fudge returns at the top, and I think he's a good piece to keep as he was pretty good in the summer split of 2023, and he's never really been a liability for his team. What's interesting about keeping him though is that with the preseason changes of 2024, we're definitely going to see more action in the top side with these Void Grubs, which gives a buff to the team that kills them, granting them extra damage to turrets and unlocking more split push. Now, this is where I think having a stronger laning top laner could have actually been more beneficial to Cloud9. Now, that's not to say that Fudge is a bad top laner or anything, but he's not what I would consider aggressive. Oftentimes it's Blaber that will come top to gank for Fudge, crashing a wave, rather than Fudge getting a solo kill. So I hope that Cloud9 can try to bring out more aggression from him and create more of a stronger top side for this new objective, and to also add to Cloud9's toolbox when it comes time for international competition. Because I think this is where they're really going to struggle, especially with Fudge in the top lane, because he hasn't really looked that good in international competitions, so he's gonna have to brush up his skills in the LCS before he lands on the big stage. Blaber runs it back in the jungle, and this is the most obvious pickup in free bingo space of all time. Best jungler NA, he's gunning for just straight up best player NA of all time, so it's basically up to Blaber at this point whether he wants to leave Cloud9 or not, because Jack is always going to keep re-signing him. Blaber was dominant in the summer split, far and away the best jungler, and what will be interesting to see is how well he works with Jojopyun. For LCS, it's surely going to be overkill with these two being at the middle of the map, and so I don't think any other team is going to even come close to challenging them. But for international competition, we'll have to see how they fare against elite mid-jungle duos. Also, I will mention that Blaber usually comes out the gate hard for spring split, and I think that's mostly because he figures out the meta very quickly. With such huge changes coming into the game now for 2024, I think this is only going to have a huge advantage for Blaber as he'll adapt while everyone else gets left behind. So overall, great pickup, a carnivore jungler who's very aggressive and can activate the early game, and obviously just the best choice. And if we're already talking about how he can be a future LCS Hall of Famer, it's a no-brainer to sign him for a couple more years. JoJo is coming in as Cloud9's newest mid laner, and Jack, you fucking sly dog, he's done it again. JoJo is a fantastic pickup, and I'm sure there was probably a bidding war between him and Steve. JoJo was MVP of the 2023 summer split, and rightly so. He was an absolute monster on that EG team, and given that Blaber has played with Jensen, Nizki, and Perks, with one player being a little more aggressive, one more roam heavy, and the last being passive, I think that at this point Blaber can easily adapt to any mid laner's playstyle. Now, the major criticism that I have for JoJo was that he was a terrible team fighter and skirmisher during the early parts of his career. He has quickly shored that weakness up and is actually spreading his lead out to the rest of the map. I'd say that he's learned that in order to win more games, he's got to help out his teammates, and there's only so much that you can do against your lane opponent until they start mitigating that loss in mid and destroy the other parts of your team against you. You also have to consider his competition this year is basically only Jensen, so there hasn't been an easier year for JoJo to dominate dominate the entire league from the mid lane position. And there's another underrated aspect that I think a lot of people are going to miss about this roster, which is that Hai is their team manager slash assistant coach. So while I won't go into a speech about Hai here, I do think it's worth mentioning how much knowledge JoJo will be able to glean from Hai if they can work a bit together. So all in all, I think JoJo will fit pretty well within this Cloud9 roster, and this will be the year where JoJo grows up outside of the game. He's a great piece to pick up if you have the coin to spend, and we'll call it his sophomore contract, even though of course it's literally not his second year. But this is a player where you probably want him to play for your org for a couple of years, and you can already tell Jack is setting up the chessboard for the future. Berserker stays in North America to fill the ADC role. This guy looked wonderful during 2023, and it's clear that Cloud9 wanted to see if there's even more in the tank of Berserker instead of having Sven take his place as ADC for 2024. I think this is one of the strongest points of this roster, but what will be interesting to see is how Berserker will have to adapt his playstyle around his new support Vulcan. This is the major question mark that I have for Berserker, which is that Vulcan has a different style and champion pool than Sven, often looking as a good main or follow-up initiator, versus Sven was definitely more suited towards enchanters. This will be a huge test to see if Berserker can actually play with the only other variation that an ADC needs in his playbook. Not only does Vulcan have a different skill set than his former support Sven, but with Drake's being less of a win condition in season 14 presumably, there's also going to be even less priority given to bot lane from other lanes and jungle. So we'll have to see if Berserker can operate with minimal supervision. Lastly, we have Vulcan in the support position, which is just a stellar pickup. He previously played in Cloud9, winning 2 championships with them in 2020 spring and 2021 spring. This is the most plug and play that you're ever gonna get. He already has synergy with Fudge and Blaber, and to top it off, he has also played with JoJo in EG and won another championship in 2022 spring. So the only other player that he hasn't played with is Berserker. Now, I will say that he had a bad summer split with FlyQuest in 2023, but I'm always willing to give a veteran like Vulcan a freebie for a fuck up. It's one bad split and a string of a really great career, so I do think he'll bounce back, especially surrounded by his old teammates. The big question here though is Vulcan really capable of being the vocal piece to represent the bot lane? He didn't look great with Prince, who is a really phenomenal ADC, and then you have my boy Piglet, where he also had trouble in way back on Clutch Gaming. Like I was saying before, this is really a test for not only Berserker to change his style with a more engaged support, but it's a test for Vulcan as well, to see if he can lead a Korean ADC. He's yet to really prove that, so we'll have to see how he looks in conjunction with Berserker. So I touched on Hai a bit, but I think it's really important to note just how well this coaching staff is thought out this year on Cloud9. Hai being the team manager slash assistant coach is actually their secret buff and will undoubtedly help JoJo acclimate to his first new team. Understanding Hai's perspective on pressure and working with a good jungler who can sometimes have a selfish playstyle is something Hai's very familiar with. This kind of reminds me of the time when the NFL team, the Seahawks, brought on Jerry Rice in 2004, a legendary wide receiver and Hall of Famer. Now, he really wasn't expected to play a whole lot, more so just a father figure to impart wisdom to the other wide receivers. I think that's what's going on here, in that Hai can sort of be a listening ear to JoJo and teach him a thing or two about team dynamics and just esports in general. Now you have Mithy, which is just the perfect coach to keep if you want to balance it out with High. Mithy is super blunt and will challenge you on the game. Aside from having interviewed Mithy personally, there's a distinct instance I remember where Mithy shows his blunt side and plays the bad guy, and it's fucking spot on.
I think we don't have a bad guy, and we need a bad guy in this team. And we are not really improving by being nice about all these things. Just need to be straightforward and say what's wrong and fix it. And if someone is not happy with it or things are not the right way, then just go to the root of the problem, have a big argument, fix it, or boom. But the way things are right now, it's not gonna change. So I'd rather go into extreme mode than have this go this way. For me, it's just pointless. Like, I'm okay with taking all the blame. I'm okay with everything, but I refuse to not make playoffs or lose playoffs without actually just going full extreme mode.
If you balance that out with High, who can essentially play good cop of hey guys, I know what it's like to be in your shoes, and I know that Mithy is being hard on you a little bit, but he does have a point, I think this could work really well. This is a dynamic between these two that could potentially be something that gives Cloud9 longevity. The problem with a lot of teams is that throughout the year, they end up breaking down because there's just no balancing factor. It's either a team that just plain refuses to say the blatantly obvious problems, or everyone is pointing out the flaws in each other and there's no one to really soften those blows. This has a potential to be one of the best coaching duos in esports if they can learn to work together. Overall, I think this lineup of Fudge, Blaber, JoJo, Berserker, and Vulcan is basically almost guaranteed #1 for LCS. On paper, it's almost but not quite a super team. They have plenty of firepower in the jungle, mid, and ADC, and I also think the entire team's playstyle is flexible enough that they'll largely be meta resistant unless it's something like pure tank junglers and enchanter supports. This team should win Spring Split just right out the gate, considering that they'll have a lot of synergy with 4 players, all being former Cloud9 players. So anything less than winning Spring is frankly unacceptable for this lineup. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe for more dope content, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.